Hello, fellow Rosarians. So I hope that you all have been snagging those deals with the Rose Geek code that I gave you from Chambly, Northland, and High Country. They have all offered to give us discounts, and so I definitely have been grabbing some roses. Let me show you where they have been hanging out since I got them. This is the nursery for all of our new roses. So those roses that I have been accumulating stay in a shady area so that I can manage them very closely until the temperature dips and I can get them in the ground. So before we talk about the care of those, I want to talk about a couple of things with you today. I want to talk with you about the sizes and let you get a look at those firsthand, establishing that nursery for your roses while you're going to be keeping them for a couple of weeks before you put them in the ground, knowing what your schedule is. When do those plants have to be in the ground? How to harden in, and then I want to talk about how to plant them. So let's go ahead and get started. And so what I've done here is I have brought out one of each rose from the vendor so that we can just do a quick comparison. So let's go ahead. Keep in mind, some people would respond and say that unless they're all the same roses, I can't do a true analysis. So be aware, they're all different varieties. They all came from different vendors. So this is the 2-gallon from J. Berry. This is a 1-gallon from Heirloom. This is a 1-gallon from Angel Gardens. This is a 1-gallon from Ma Cherie, or also known as Golden Valley. This is your 5-inch pot from Northland. This is a 5-inch pot from High Country. And then this is a band from Rogue Valley Roses. Oh, I've got one more. And this little beauty right here is from A Reverence for Roses. And one of my favorite comments when somebody saw this, they said, how does this defy physics that the root structure of this amazing rose is contained in here? But as you can see, it really wants to go in the ground. It's got its little roots coming out. So in the interest of time, I know that it's got a couple more weeks before I can put it in. I'm going to repot this in a larger planter today. It clearly wants that. So just for one quick second, this is now A Reverence for Roses, the 5-inch. And so that rose compared to High Country, also compared to Northland, and you can see the height on this one here. But these all, I mean, in one season, I would say, they're all going to catch up and be about the same size. Let me sit this one down. So in the event that you are undecided between vendors, Northland and High Country are very similarly priced. Such a bang for the buck. You know, this is primarily where I'm doing a lot of my shopping because think about it, for the number of roses that I can get here, I can probably get 2.5 or 3 roses versus one from Heirloom. So let's do a quick comparison. Over here on this side, this is this little tiny teeny band. Let me get closer. This is from Rogue Valley. Move that out of the way. Very small. And then we've got High Country and Northland Rosarium. And then this is in a next larger pot, and this is now Northland versus your Golden Valley. So I think that they are very similar in cane size, and Northland is just a little bit larger. And now if we look at the Angel Gardens against Northland, it's still very large. Let me sit this down. And so I want you guys, let's do a quick comparison. If you can find the same variety from Heirloom that you can find from Northland, I wanted you to be able to compare the size of these roses. Now, Northland has maybe one less cane, but they are very similar in age. So this is Heirloom versus Northland. Heirloom versus Ma Cherie, Heirloom versus High Country, and so it's a little bit smaller. It might have a couple of months behind on High Country. And then we can clearly see Heirloom versus a 2-gallon. It's kind of hard to pick at. The 2-gallon just out, the size is crazy. So in the event that you are watching your money and trying to decide how many roses you can get, I hope that that gives you just a real quick look at the different vendors on one table and the difference in sizes. And in the future, I'm expecting 1 gallons from David Austin. I'm expecting, I believe, 1 gallons from Chambly, 2 gallons from Antique Rose Emporium, and I think that closes us out for my fall orders. And then I'm expecting Freedom Gardens. I can't wait to see those babies. I've been waiting for a year. So now that you've seen the sizes, we've talked about that, let's talk about what do you do with these plants now. You've ordered them, they're arriving, and so you're trying to figure out now what. What I do is you need to find a place for them to rest when it's so hot like this. So I pick a shady area over by my garage that I showed you. It's under an overhang, so I can really manage the water that it's getting. I can manage the light because it's shady over there. I pull them out a little bit if I want to during the day, but then they go back. So I'm really managing everything for those roses. And when you keep them in a situation like that where they're not getting that full sun, they don't require the amount of water that they would if I was putting them in the landscape still in their pots and letting them go. Then they're gonna need that water every day. But in this case, I'm using my handy dandy water meter. When I first receive the order, I'm checking them very regularly, like every day. It just takes a hot second to put in there and make sure that it's reading moist. If it's reading wet, then I have really watered that rose too much. Let it dry down, and you want to let it go all the way dry, which is that red section there, and I let it go dry for half a day. I am finding for myself that these roses only need to be watered about once a week. Also, while I'm managing them in their little vacation spot, I'm watching for any pest. I saw one on my poor little band here that's got bedworms. So I'm managing the pest, I'm pulling off any black spot leaves, making sure that black spot leaves don't rest in the pot, just like you would do if it was normally in the bed. I am not fertilizing because I really want them to go almost, I'm not going to say dormant, but I want them to take a break until we're ready to go into the ground. So there's no fertilizer right now for these roses. The next thing that you need to figure out as you're planning to put them in the ground is you want to research when your temperature is going to be consistently 32 degrees. Because, you know, as I was reading online and you're looking at what the different vendors say for putting them in the ground, some of these vendors ship year round. Well, that, you know, if they were just shipping for your planting time, that makes it a lot easier, doesn't it? But if you are buying from, let's think who ships year round, Irreverence for Roses, Rogue Valley, who else? Angel Gardens. I'm sure there's more, but those folks that are shipping throughout the year, sometimes they will let you postpone shipping and you can buy it and then say don't ship it until this date. I know Heirloom does that too. So think about doing that if you get beyond your planting date. So let's talk about how you determine when your planting date is. When you're reading on when to plant a potted rose, some of the sites say anytime the ground isn't frozen. And then they'll also have a caveat that you might not read that says you need 2 months to establish the roots before the ground freezes. Well, wait a minute. You said I could plant any time as long as the shovel could get in the ground and the ground's not frozen. So let's think about that. How does the ground freeze? How do we know? So you need to go to Wikipedia or do a search online for your city, the averages, and it'll come back and it'll say, you know, in the month of December, this is what your average is. January, February, but you'll see those averages. And when you're seeing consistent temperatures 32 and below, now you need to be worried that your ground's going to freeze, because your ground will freeze if it has 5 consecutive days, day and night, of 32 degrees or below. So we want to avoid making sure that we're putting anything in the ground during that time. And just to be safe with your potted plants, you actually want to give them 2 months in the ground before it freezes. So in my case, I've done a search now. When does it freeze in Maryland? What is the average temperature? So the average temperature for December is when I'm hitting that point of 32 degrees. Now, being an avid gardener and being out here all the time, I know it's more like January that I can't get the shovel in the ground. But I want to go with this December date just to be safe. So I'm going to back off 2 months now before that December date, so that I allow the roots as long as possible to establish before a freeze. So for me, October 1st is it. I've got to get all the roses in the ground by October 1st. For additional information, please reach out to the American Rose Society. There's a link for consulting rosarians. Reach out to them and get their input. Get on social media, ask the groups that you're in if anybody is in your area and they can shed some light on when the ground freezes in your area. But for me, driving toward that October 1st date. So now that we've talked about what I'm driving to, I need to think about hardening in these roses. If you hear that term, hardening in, what does that mean? Hardening in means that I've got a potted rose. You don't have to harden in bare roots, because bare roots are dormant and you just soak them for 24 hours and put them in the ground. There's no hardening in. But for a potted rose that we anticipate has been grown in a greenhouse situation, it's been on a light system that's probably timed. It's an artificial light system, an artificial watering system. It's timing everything in its life. You want it to get used to your environment. So if I were to just buy, even in the spring, a potted rose, I need to harden it in. And so what does that mean? It's kind of what we're doing right now. We put it in a shady, dappled area for a week. Let it get used to your temperature, your humidity, everything, and it's going to have like a gentle ease in to your environment for a week. After a week, now it's time to start bringing it outside and hardening it in. And so what you're doing is you are bringing it out into the sun, a dappled sun area, for 30 minutes the first time. Bring it back in, look at those leaves, see if they're burnt, and if it tolerated 30 minutes okay, go ahead and bring it out a little bit longer the next time. And keep on doing this back and forth until eventually you're increasing the amount of time, and it might take you a week to harden in, depending on how it does each time you bring it out. You may see, like if I were to just bring it out for an hour and a half, that full sun on those leaves were just too much. Bring it back a little bit the next day, but gently get it used to being in your environment until it's fully in its location, it can take your sun, and it's happy. So once you've hardened in your rose, then you are going to plant it. And so one of the important things that I want you to realize is that when you're planting a rose, my go-to is a granular fertilizer, and I use Biotone. It's still very gentle and it's organic, but many of the vendors are not liking that granular fertilizer, especially for the little babies. So I would say Northland, High Country, everybody on the smaller side over here, we should consider fish fertilizer, Great Big Roses, because they're liquid. And Heirloom says that you're going to void their warranty if you use a granular like Biotone. So make it easy. You know, if you're putting babies in the ground, go ahead and use Great Big Roses or Alaska Fish Fertilizer. And then for your larger roses, like this one here, the 2 gallon can definitely handle Biotone, and that would be my preference. So just look at the requirements for the warranty from the vendor you're purchasing from, and then decide what works for you. If you want to use a liquid initially, or if you want to use the Biotone granular, but don't use anything synthetic. Sometimes it's just too shocking on that roots to use Miracle Grow or something along those lines. So I've done a video, I'm going to link it up here. If I were putting a band in the ground, that would be, and they call these bands this 5-inch pot. If I'm going to put this in the ground, I've done a video to show an easy way to put it in the ground and make sure that you're being as gentle as possible with those roots. For the larger size, the 1 gallons, you would just go ahead and dig as normal. Dig a hole that's a little bit larger than what you need. Put your fertilizer in, put the plant in, backfill if you want compost or any kind of amendment, go ahead and backfill. And my recommendation is to make sure that you get some of your native soil in there also. In my case, it's hit or miss whether or not I can use my native soil because it's such hard clay. But you'll have to decide once you start digging that what you want to backfill with. So, one last question before we end for today. Should I put these babies in the ground? So what I look for when I'm trying to decide if a rose needs to be kept over, wintered over in a shielded location is look at tender growth. Does it have too much tender growth? So when I look at this rose, this 2 gallon from J. Berry, there's absolutely no reason why this can't go into the ground. All of these canes are firm. This is definitely a 2-year-old rose. I mean, it's got some size to it. This one here from Heirloom, it can definitely go in the ground. This is larger than a pencil, and all of these smaller canes, they're not even really giving like they're bending, like they're entirely too soft from like that red new growth that you get. So this one can go in the ground also. This one I think is going to be fine, but for me it just doesn't feel as mature as the Heirloom one. So this one's on the fence. I'm gonna have to watch it for another 2 weeks, whether or not I would prefer just not to take a chance and to keep it in a sheltered location. Northland, very happy, vigorous, no reason that this can't go into the ground. It is a great rose, very healthy. This is Ma Cherie. The canes are larger than a pencil. No reason that this can't go into the ground. High Country, this one can go on the ground, it's fine. Rogue Valley, there is no way that I am going to leave this little baby outside to fend for itself. Look at this thing, it is just so tiny. There is no way. And so why do I make this decision? When I look at the canes that are coming out of the trunk of this, they are the size of a needle. I mean, I can't take this chance. It was way too expensive to lose it and risk, yes, its own root. There's a chance it's going to come back. It's already come back for me once. I'm not going to push it, and it's just as easy for me to find a sheltered location and winter this one over. I also have a couple of propagations that I have made myself, and they're in a similar situation. There's no way that I'm going to leave them outside for the winter. So let's talk about real quick, and I'll have another video later because I just want to get you thinking about how we're going to deal with these babies. I have a garage, so I'm going to bring them into a garage. I've got a window. They will stay in front of the window, and it's not conditioned at all in my garage, and that's perfect for these because we still want them to go somewhat dormant. I'm still going to be watching them during the winter. Still no fertilizer. Give them their water on a regular basis. Make sure that they have adequate light, and then in the spring I will harden them in when it's time, and then they'll be ready to go in the ground. So I hope that this was valuable information and not too much information, but I wanted to make sure that as you're buying all of these babies that you are making sure that you are keeping them in a location until it's time to go in, that you understand when they need to go in and what date you're driving to, how to harden in, how to put them in the ground, and then how to protect those that need to stay outside. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.